Hello, 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 and welcome, folks, to another edition to Faith Unaltered. I'm your host, David Russell, and I am joined by my awesome Real Seeker co-host, Dale Glover. How you doing, buddy? I know we just saw each other at 11 for the special with Nathan Jacobs today. I hope you guys check that out. But Dale, how you doing, man?
Yeah, yeah, I'm doing good. As you said, I was on the show at 11 with Dr. Nathan Jacobs on his view of philosophy of time and how that relates to God's knowledge. And yeah, I was listening to his take. I didn't obviously agree with his understanding on that front, but it's he did a great job presenting his
Yeah,
position there.
it's definitely interesting. I do think I agreed with some of what he was saying. But obviously, I mean, we're going to collide on some other issues. But I think that some of the things he said are just basic that I don't think a lot of people consider. But it's a great episode, and I encourage each and every one of you to check it out. Um,
You know what made it
so
great?
it was great.
You know what made it great is that you didn't open your mouth. I don't think you got to ask a single question.
I didn't get to ask much. No, we had a lot of technical issues, so I'm sorry about that. If you guys watch it, we did have a lot of technical issues. Nathan's mic was really bad in the beginning, and that hindered a lot of the time we had in. I mean, what should have been like maybe the first half hour turned into the first hour.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. But once it got going, it was good. So
Yeah.
check it out.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, there's a lot that he presented. I think that even like us Protestants, we do actually need to consider and think about. Obviously, we're going to have disagreements, especially on our take of history and so forth, and our even views on this type of philosophy. So we'll have some fundamental disagreements, but there are some things I think that are common to all of us that I think I agreed on. I don't know about you, Dale.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he said things that I would agree with as well, and that sort of thing. But as everyone knows, like you, I'm a Molinist, and I think that that makes the best sense and stuff like that. So yeah, there is certain things on that front in terms of the grounding of God's knowledge about the future and what free creatures will do in the future. That's where I was kind of seeing a disagreement there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, other than that, I mean, tonight we've got a great episode for you guys. I'm even wearing my old Pora shirt to remind people to check out the old episodes we did on CSG and Pora and how we came together to become Faith Unaltered. Yes, we are a multi-platform ministry that comes from all different faith backgrounds. Even Dale's a different denomination of Protestant than I am. Tyler's Orthodox. So I mean, we have so many different representations here. And here's the thing: we know we might disagree on things, but we come together anyway because we agree that Jesus Christ is Lord, right? So,
What is
uh,
your denomination
go
of
ahead.
curiosity? I've never asked you what is your denomination because I'm Baptist. I'm attending a
Yeah.
Presbyterian church, but I'm Baptist. I'm not Presbyterian. So
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I am what you call non-denominational.
okay,
I do hold more closely to Baptist belief, though. So I am more. I
sure.
lean heavily towards that faith. So, but
Okay.
other than that, like I claim a lot like Josh, and there's Josh Davidson, our storyteller, and it's
Hello.
funny is Josh is considered the storyteller, but I get paid to storytell. So
Nah, 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 nah.
no, but
Using captions and
Josh, it's so great to see you again, buddy. How's your week, bro?
That's been fantastic. The last 2 weeks have been actually pretty fast paced and remarkable.
I see
But
you
it
have
was,
a graduate amongst you.
yes, yeah, my daughter is transitioning into kindergarten officially.
Wow.
And my son is going to be 10 next month. So a lot of change happening, double digits
Oh
and all
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah. That's a
how,
big
where
one,
did
man.
you see that? Is there a sign or something? I didn't see anything.
Well, because you don't know what Facebook is, and you don't decide to get on that to see what your family and friends are doing because you're a heretic. But it's okay. We love you
Okay.
anyway, even though you're from Canada.
Your fancy schmancy social media. Okay, I understand. Yeah.
Yep.
But other than that, guys, hey, look, this is a very special show tonight, and we want your interaction. So I mean, by all means interact with us. I know we had a show earlier today, but come back on. interact with us, talk with us. We're doing another show on deconstruction. We're trying to deconstruct the deconstructed. So we're trying to like say, hey, look, maybe you haven't thought about this. By not saying that, hey, look, we understand there are cliches all throughout the Christian faith that could push people away. We understand that fundamentalism has pushed people away. We understand that a lack of knowledge has pushed people away. There's several different reasons to that these things happen. So what we're trying to get at is why they're happening, what's your reasoning, and let's talk about it. Because I don't know about you guys, but like when I gave my life to Christ, and then I experienced a huge a doubting season in my life, where I questioned everything. I laid it all out on the table, and I was like, I'm going to follow the evidence. And yes, I'm not going to lie and say that, we all don't have biases. And in my mind, I thought all the time, hey, look, if I gave my life to this, I kind of need to know what it's about. I really need to study it. I really need to know. And I don't know if you guys have experienced that. Have you guys experienced those type of doubting seasons?
Yeah. So in my case, David, I'm not sure if the Faith Unaltered guys know about my testimony or not, but yeah, I went for a period of 8 years or so of doubt kind of thing. So in 2000, around 2009, 2010, I lost my faith in Jesus. I grew up a Christian, that sort of thing. And because of my doubts, I left the faith. I stopped believing in Christianity. And that's where I kind of had a 6-month period as an agnostic before I became a general theist and realized, okay, look, I'm being called to do this religious quest to investigate and do research into the various religions and the evidence for and against. And it took about 8 years, working with experts and stuff like that. And finally in 2018, that's when I realized that Christianity is in fact true and came back to the faith. And I've been dedicated to Christ ever since. So yeah, I've had about an 8-year period of being a doubter, you could say. Or deconstruct. I don't like the word deconstructed. It sounds so postmodernist and stupid. Look, I deconverted. I was not a believer in Christ. Okay, that's what I was. I wasn't some postmodernist deconstructionist wacko or something like that. I don't use terminology like that. So.
Right on. Well, it's true. We all go through it. I mean, Josh shook his head. Do you want to speak on anything, Josh, on that?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I ever had a period of necessarily walking away from the faith entirely, but I definitely had what I would call my apostate semblance of a party phase when I was between 19 and 22 years old. And I was
3 years is it? Gosh.
Yeah. No, I'm a stubborn chap. There's not a lot that'll keep me away, but I was very disenchanted when I became old enough to be, let's say, an active member in my church that I grew up in. I was in a Baptist church, but when I became about 16 or so, I started being able to sit in on business meetings. When I turned 17, I was allowed to participate in the meetings that I was sitting in on. And when I was in there, I was struck by how often the things that they were considering and deliberating over seemed to be excuses to be irritable with one another. And most of the disputes that they were having were either politically oriented or else some sort of aesthetic scruples about whether or not they should have chairs or pews in the church. And so I was just really struck by the fact that the people who I had spent most of my life looking up to were just as full of snakes as I was. And that was very disenchanting because I did not have the expectation that they would be just as flawed as me. They did not present that front when I was growing up, and so I came to realize later on that most of what we mean by, the deconstruction thing or, moving out of the faith and into question, a lot of that stuff, especially the people who end up leaving, my experience is most of it is not based on reason. It's actually based on faulty expectations.
Yeah, so Spartan, Ethan, I know you said, hey,
He's asking
I
how
can't get
long
on
do
till later. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it depends on how long we get through the actual, because I said this is an interactive. I just sent out the the uh the link for you guys if you do want to get on and talk to us. I mean, obviously we haven't really said much yet, but our intros and some things that we've been through. But yeah, when we get done with these, if you can come on and you still see us on, by all means, you can just you can hit up the link there and come on as well. But yeah, so yeah, I hear you, Josh. I think we all have had battles, with doubt, and we've all had battles with our faith. There's a reason it's called in the Psalm striving with God, right? So we
Mm.
have to strive sometimes. We have to persevere, or we have to get to know who God is. We have to get to know our faith. We have to really get to know what we believe and why we believe it. This is why I love apologetics, and I love cultural apologetics, is because, we have to face these things. I get so tired of the inner squabblings. I just want to save people, man. I want to get people saved. I don't save them, Jesus does, but I want to show them Jesus the best way I can, So I mean, we talk about these things, and we actually present videos of some people's objections, and that's what we're going to get into tonight. And the first one I have all ready to go. So as we present, we will stop, guys. Again, if you want me to stop it, um uh let me know when to stop it and I will pause it. All right, just like last
Okay.
time. And audience, if you just want to comment in the chat, more than happy to try to answer your questions and star them and get them up here. All right, so hang with us and enjoy.
The second thing that I remember being really impactful on my journey of deconstruction was the argument of free will. Whenever I did start to question whether or not God was good, and God, like this is a question that I asked a lot. I was like, God, how could you be just if you're only punishing evil and not preventing it, when it's completely within your power to do that? What's going on? And the answer to that, to me, that it always satisfied me, was the free will answer. Like, if he hadn't have given us free will in the beginning, we wouldn't be able to truly love him. We wouldn't be able to truly love each other. Like, we would just be robots, and he would be essentially forcing us into a relationship with him. Now that I've done a little bit more research into the Bible, and I'm reading it from the beginning to end for the first time, I find that the argument of free will doesn't really seem to be consistent with the God of the Bible. So discovering that free will really wasn't a biblical idea, that...
All right, so like this is the first one I kind of want to stop at, right?
Mm.
Because I think there's a lot of things telling here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, notice this, right? She already deconstructed, right? And now,
Mhm.
for the first time, she is reading the Bible all the way through.
Right. Yeah. It
Because
sounds
she's
like she
already
was going through this problem without any counsel.
right. And not only that, but I mean, if you're going to give up your faith without even reading the Bible, I mean, what faith did you have to begin with? She's already deconstructed, so she already has that bias. So of course, the free will answer doesn't work for her, because she's already looking for a reason not to accept it or not even give it an honest go around. I think bias does play a fact and colors your perception into how you look at the faith, especially when you're already kind of set against it. But I mean, I think she's right where she's like, I don't think freedom, I think without freedom, love has no meaning, you know? And the argument of free will, like, she asks God, how could you be just if you are only punishing evil and not preventing it? And it is completely within your power to do so. And I say, or is it? I mean, if there's certain things that make reality, certain things that constitute a system of what things are, can God just readily go against it without changing the very nature of that reality, right? Where does actually the boundaries of reality actually extend to where, we already know God does miracles, right? The resurrection of Jesus, the best,
Right.
creation of the world, the first, God already does miracles, but does, where, things have to operate in a regular order in order to be able for that reality, I guess, to be expressed.
One
Well,
thing,
and also, oh, go ahead, Dale. You're good.
yeah, just very quickly then, and I'll give it to you, Josh. But one thing that struck me that's different here, is that when she started reading the Bible, the free will argument wasn't in it, and I'm just wondering what the heck is she talking about? And the only thing I can think of is, well, it's not explicitly mentioned. Maybe she had this false notion that, well, I didn't see any verses that said, and the reason God allows evil is because of the free will argument. Okay, but the problem of evil itself is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible either, but you believe in that, right? So it's you have to read the Bible properly, and free will is everywhere throughout the Bible. I mean, just read Hebrews. It's by we choose to place our faith in Jesus or not, and on that basis, we are declared righteous or not. We choose to repent of our sins or not once we recognize our sins. But free will is everywhere. The story of Abraham. Were you reading Genesis? I mean, there's talks about their free will in disobeying or obeying. It's everywhere in the Bible. It's presupposed and fundamental to questions of morality throughout the entirety of the Bible. So the only thing I can think of is when she says, "Oh, there's no mention of like free will or human beings being morally responsible for their decisions." It's not explicitly spelled out. In which case, I just go, the problem of evil isn't explicitly spelled out either. Nowhere in the Bible is there premise one, blah blah blah, premise two. So yeah, I think we just have to be a bit more sophisticated and realize it's not going to be spelled out explicitly like it seems she was expecting. So that's the one thing that stood out to me on that front.
Faulty expectations. See, here's the thing: is she opened up with, I had always thought that free will was a good answer for the problem of evil, and then the way she phrased the question was, if God doesn't want evil, he can punish evil, but he doesn't prevent evil. What gives? I would say, who told you that he doesn't prevent evil? I think that that's a weird thing to say. You don't have to get past Genesis to find God preventing evil. Abraham goes to Egypt, and when he's in Egypt, he prevents the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, from taking Abraham's wife into his bridal chamber. And when he's confronted, God tells him, "I stopped you. It was me. I withheld this from you." God prevented evil. It's not like he's never done that. But I think what she's trying to do is create a false dilemma in which God either prevents all evil from occurring or else is indifferent to evil somehow until afterward, when he just wants to get his masochist kicks off to prevent people from enjoying evil. So he punishes them. But it's just weird that she would, like, almost on the house assume. And even when she says she's reading the Bible and studying the Bible, you don't even have to get past the first book of the Bible before you recognize both free will and evil prevention. It's all there in just the first book, honestly.
What I wonder, though, is like how she knew about the free will argument, but yet she hadn't read her Bible yet. I mean, there's something way off there,
Yeah.
It blows my mind. But we have Michael Holcomb. How you doing, buddy?
Hey guys, good to see you all. I saw you were live and thought I'd jump in. Yeah, so I'm a little bit late to the conversation, but very interested in what you guys are talking about. How are you all?
All right, man. All right, man. So we're gonna continue to play. Just like I said, tell us to stop when you want us to stop. I do want to get to this question real quick because this is an interactive night, so we're gonna interact with the audience as well. Sean Schultz said, even if he could, is he required to? Does God owe us an existence in which we're protected from the consequences of each other's choices. And what I would say real quick here is that I don't think it's possible to have multiple amount of free creatures without the caveat of there being the of dealing with the consequences of each other's choices. It's our burden to bear for being created to begin with. Does he owe us it? No, absolutely not. But I do think there's an element here that that when we look at that, we have to bear that. I mean, that's just part of our nature. I think it's part of reality, like I was saying before.
And to your point, David, also because you mentioned that she somehow knew and she articulated it pretty well as like a truncated shorthand version, but she knew the argument for free will as the answer to theodicy. I think maybe she learned the way to phrase it as the way that she did there, as a kind of after event. And when she was experiencing the difficulty, if I'm to believe, I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. When she's experiencing the doubt and difficulty, she probably didn't have that formulation of the problem or the answer. She had a vague notion in her mind and tried to fill the gaps and didn't know how to do so without counsel, and then ran to an extreme, which is usually what people do when they have a question mark and they don't know how to work through things with good counsel. They tend to do a pendulum swing from one extreme to another.
And that's also often the condition, even without being religious, right? I mean, I've seen it in everyday life, but neither here nor there. Michael, you had an opinion on that?
Yeah, could you put that question back up on the screen? I thought it was worded pretty in an interesting way. Is
Yep,
he
I got it.
required, even if he could, is he required to? Does God owe us an existence in which we're protected from the consequences of each other's choices? I don't think so. I don't think God owes us anything, but I certainly don't think he owes us, a life or an existence free of danger, free of suffering, free of evil. Certainly God provides for his people and protects people in scripture, but there's also an immense amount of danger and suffering. And, I would say no to answer that question.
Can I?
Yeah, right on. Yeah, Dale, go for it, man. You didn't get a chance yet, so go for it.
Kind of an interesting contrast. I would answer yes to that question. Yes and no, I guess. So here's my yes. If all else is equal, yes, I think a morally perfect God would bring about the best circumstances, right? And that would be no sins, no evil, nothing like that. And God is actively, the Bible tells us he is actively restraining us from sinning and stuff like that. Now that said, okay, obviously God in the real world does permit evils to come about, and that's because all else is not equal. We as beings are created to interact and engage with each other, and that brings about the ultimate good. That it's necessary in order to arrive at the end state of the new heavens and the new earth. We can't just be in isolated little bubbles. That's not going to be the best outcome. And we need to interact and engage with each other and have relationships with God and with others. And that necessarily entails the fact that consequences are going to have effects on other people and stuff like that, whether good or bad. So, yeah, I would answer yes if all else is equal, but in reality, it's just impossible for all else to be equal. So, in the end, I agree with Michael. The answer is no.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I hear you guys, and I think we're able to now move on to the next stage if you guys are ready.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of helped me realize that it wasn't a good explanation. But then one day I was thinking about heaven and, the likelihood that I wasn't going to go there anymore. It's not funny. I was thinking about how in heaven we're going to have a new nature, a new body. I had always been really excited for that, and I think a lot of Christians are excited for that too. There wouldn't be any sadness anymore, and we would have a new nature given to us by God so that we would no longer be tempted to sin, and we would actually be able to love each other more fully than ever before. And that...
All right, here's the second one. I gotta say, I gotta say, I like where she's coming from here because I've heard the cliches, right? We're always told that we're going to get a new nature and a new body, but this is where it's categorically wrong. What is meant by having a new nature? The term is used a lot. I mean, I agree with that. And what does it mean to have a new body? I mean, these are Christian catchphrases, right? But it seems that the concept wasn't truly explained to her, like Josh is talking about with counsel. We don't get a new nature in heaven. That starts at the moment of salvation, right? We put off the old and put on the new. And then to further that, God is giving us a new reality where we have the free will. Or let me say this, because she does say that God is giving us a new reality where we have free will, but our choice to sin isn't there, right? And we'll get to that in a minute, but I want to hear your guys' answers first because I don't want to jump subjects.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll say very quickly, it's stuff that I've said on past shows with on deconstruction, is again, look, she's making a mistake by assuming the end state constitutes a possible world in and of itself, that we can just arrive at this end state divorced from, going through the fallen world and then the pre-fall world. No, the pre-fall, the fallen world, and then the end state, all of that combined is one world. We had to go through this step to get to that point, kind of thing, right? So you can't just divorce and take out, okay, one state at time 3 and think that, oh yeah, God could have just created time 3. No, we had to go through time 1, time 2 in order to arrive at time 3. So that's the only thing I'll add. It's what I've said before. So yeah.
And I got something on that too later when we answer the next objection.
Yeah, so coming from a Wesleyan background, theologically we talk about entire sanctification, and that's often conflated wrongly with glorification. That's not what we mean. But the idea that the heart can be entirely sanctified in this life, that original sin can be removed, and that the posture of our heart can be rightly ordered and rightly directed, and that we can love purely and without ulterior motive in this life, like the Spirit empowers us to do that. That we can love others purely without ulterior motive, that we can love God purely without ulterior motive, even ourselves purely without ulterior motive, and the creation purely. So I don't think that at all is something that we need to be waiting for, that we can love purely and with a right heart posture and rightly ordered desires in this life.
And Michael, this is so essential. I think what you're saying here as well is because, I mean, how do we bring the kingdom of heaven to earth? I mean, that's the whole Jesus always talked about, bringing the kingdom to earth. Why? Because it starts now. It's not something that's just way off in the future. It's now and to come, you know? So I do agree with that. I think that, yes, we can bring heaven to earth by how we love one another, how we our lives are transformed, how that good fruit begins to bear out. And this is so essential to the gospel. And this is why it's like, okay, so now you're reading the Bible. This is why I commented on that earlier. Now you're reading the Bible after you deconstructed for the first time all the way through. What did you read before? Did you just read script, different sections? So of course you're not going to understand the context, right?
Yeah.
Josh, go ahead, man. I know I just jumped over you.
No, it's good. It's good. I was actually going to bring up Spencer's response here. He said, we have a new nature and a new body according to the seed that falls to the ground and dies in 1 Corinthians 15. This life matters and affects the next. Mm-hmm. I think that's ultimately the point. And it sounds like where she's going with this and is the assumption that it would have been better. I think she's trying to advise God or correct him in that it would have been more appropriate to give mankind a nature that was compatible with a perfect garden-like place to begin with. But again, you don't have to go past Genesis to see that's exactly what happened. And so it seems like even now, that she's making these objections and claiming that she's reading the Bible, I'm not sure what she's reading. Like, it seems very odd that everything that she's saying so far is resolved even in Genesis.
So you have to deconstruct from this deconstructing.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the show, right?
Reversion.
Deconstructing. All right, here we go, guys. Here we go.
Made me think, if God is going to create a reality for his elect where we're given some form of free will, but without the choice or the temptation to sin, then there would have been nothing preventing God from doing that at the beginning. So while previously I thought that it would have been impossible for God to create a world where we didn't have free will and we were also able to truly love people and to truly choose to love God, I now realize that that impossible world was the exact world that I was looking forward to living in after I died. And
all right, so I got to stop it again because this is where that next part, and I should have let it play so we could answer both of them, but I'm glad we stopped at that so we could hone in on one at a time here. But God is giving us a new reality where we have free will, but our choice to sin isn't there. And I find this to be highly problematic because, again, I agree with Dale on this 100%. There's a progression, right? Our choice isn't taken away because we get to heaven, right? It's because we have a change of reality, a change in nature. It's our glorification through the progression of belief that eliminates that desire to sin. It eliminates it. It's like C.S. Lewis describes in The Great Divorce. It's grains of sand on the ground that we trod. It's no longer something we even think about. I don't think about each grain of sand that I step on when I walk, or each piece of dirt when I walk. Why? Because it's so far from my mind. My mind is on other things, right? So, like, again, when we're going through this progression, and even Michael, you alluded to this as well, our progression of belief really does eliminate that desire to sin, eliminates it. We become actualized through a progression of living that will seal us towards that end. Satan, look, Satan, we're given an example of how this works without progression, right? We see Satan had free will in heaven, but he never progressed in glorification. He fell in that perfect state. So the fact that we are going through this reality that is going to prepare us, we have an example that we can look to and say, okay, well, God could have made it like this. He could have made us live in this perfect world already, and he could have prevented all this. But we see what happens when he did with his other creation, with his other creatures, with Satan, and he took a third of heaven with him. There has to be something to that. There has to be something to going through this progression, going through the ability to be able to have that potentiality to sin. And what happens when we actually sin? What's the recourse? What happens? How do we get out of that, become new to where we are that? And I would say redemption. Jesus was the plan A. It was Jesus and him showing us the horrors of what that sin could do. Dying for us on a cross, saying this is what sin brings. This is the death sin brings, even in the afterlife. You look at the cross, the suffering on the cross, and you can see what sin can actually bring about. Yes, there's a lot of different caveats. I'm only going into one simple part of this, the horror of a crucifixion, right? Which is one of, now to us, we look at it's one of the most beautiful things that I've ever done. That I think Josh illustrates that beautifully when he tells that story about the atonement, but could have God created the end before the beginning? I don't think so. And I think that's where it comes back to that progression, right? I don't think he could have created the end before the beginning. It just doesn't logically make sense, right? So that's what I wanted to say. I don't think so. And the only example we have of a free moral agent being created before without all that progression is the one that rebelled.
Right.
Go ahead, guys.
Well, it's also the case that she seems to be assuming that the presence of free will means an absolute certainty of inevitable sin. And I would say that we actually have, even outside of humanity, evidence that that's weird and silly, because only a third of the angels fell. The rest of them remained in glory with the Lord, and they were not less free than Lucifer, right? They were not any less free than the minions, right? And ultimately, there's a difference between the possibility, logically speaking, of being able to sin in heaven because you have free will, right? And the likelihood by which you would actually, deliver upon that. And so I actually had a conversation with somebody yesterday. It was completely unrelated to this. But it was a compatibilist, and he was asking me a very similar question. After your resurrection and you receive your new body and you're in glory with the Lord forever and ever, do you still have free will? And I said, yes. And he said, doesn't that mean sin is still possible? And I said, technically speaking, yes, but it is voided all likelihood. And he said, what do you mean? And what I would say is, ultimately, I have a front lawn. It's not really a front lawn. It's about a 10-foot cube or square of grass in the front yard. But all of the cats in the neighborhood seem to enjoy going there to use the restroom. And I told him that I could go downstairs and I could forage through the grass and find myself a nice pile, and I could dine on it. But there is insanely low likelihood that I would ever do so. And yet the freedom and the capacity and the possibility are all equally there. And yet you will not find me dining on cat poo, the same way that you won't find saints in heaven dining on sin, because it looks and feels the same disgust. That's what I'm talking about, ultimately, is the difference between the capacity for choice and the likelihood to fall into that choice. And the likelihood to fall into that choice in terms of the sin of Adam versus the sin of a saint in resurrection and glory in the end is the capacity to know better. The wisdom of experience. Adam had no such experience and lacked the wisdom, also lacking omniscience, no point of reference. He and his wife were both ignorant and fell. Eve was deceived, and Adam sinned primarily, honestly, not just in eating the fruit, but in blaming Eve and God and having a lack of honesty, integrity, and repentance when God addressed him and said, "Who told you were naked? You ate the fruit, didn't you?" And he said, "It was the woman you gave me." And the finger was pointed everywhere except where it actually should have been.
Passing the buck.
Right? Exactly.
The biggest human flaw of all ages.
Right. And so like to repeat that pattern without any of the, there's nothing analogous anymore when you actually break down the scenario between a glorified saint and Adam. And so her question actually is something that I think perhaps she hadn't actually thought about. It's something that she heard and thought was compelling, which is very different.
Yeah.
And then there's also the buzzword that she brought in there, and I think it's interesting that it was pointed out. She said the magic word elect. She brings the predestination presuppositions into what she's reading in the Bible. She referred to the resurrected state of saints in heaven as the elect, which ultimately is a calling card for a particular kind of systematic theology in which free will is actually not a feature.
Yeah,
so no
exactly.
wonder.
Yeah, but also, Josh, she thought that was the good argument. So now she's conflating two different worldviews that are already kind of opposed to each other. So, I mean, we don't even know where this girl's coming from at this point. Like, where is she? What theological background was she even taught? Was she taught through a fundamentalist that you know, backyard preacher that never studied a day in his life, that just thought he was preaching the good news? And that happens sometimes. That's the double-edged sword of freedom of religion, is you can have in this country somebody that doesn't know how to read the Bible and read a 2,000 to 6,000 year old manuscript and be able to understand it, you know, and just start preaching. And you can preach predestination in one sermon and then preach free will in the next, and then be just so inconsistent when you're asked questions that they're all over the map when you're trying to get a cohesive answer.
Right. And it's possible that she grew up in a church that had a more classical free will answer to the theodicy, and yet she didn't have a very deep understanding of why she was taught that. She simply accepted it, and then there was this unfortunate interruption, and she might have met a reformed person who challenged her on all those presuppositions, and she didn't have a ground to stand on, and then was convinced by this person or several people or circumstance or whatever that Calvinism was the viable and most accurate interpretation of Scripture, and found that God appalling and said, I want nothing to do with you, and walked away because she didn't know how to square the circle.
Right.
Can I ask, because I missed the first few minutes of this, one, where did y'all find, how did y'all find this video? And then two, has anyone interacted with her directly? Just curious.
Oh, absolutely not. I haven't been able to interact with her. I think I left a comment on her page. If you notice, it says TikTok in the bottom.
Yeah.
These come up in my feed all the time because I'm really interested in deconstruction. I'm really interested in what these people are going through, because I've been through a period of doubt, so I take these seriously, and I love to actually interact with these people and talk to them to see where they're coming from. And if not, just to be a person that listens to them and hears their doubts, and maybe be able to say, hey, look, that's not how I see it, and this is how I see it,
Gotcha.
But yeah. But Dale, go ahead, man. I know you have something to say here. Dale, you're muted. All right, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead if you have anything else.
No, that's what I had for now. Yeah, we can keep going.
Dale, I don't know what's going on, man. You're muted or something.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, cool. So, yeah, something that she said kind of struck me, and it's something I'm going to agree with Josh a lot on. But where she was mentioning that, like, God can create us with free will without being privy to temptation, to sin, or something like that, without the ability to sin, or something like that. And I think that's totally false, right? I mean, at the very least, in the pre-fall state, it's an inherent thing to have for being a free will creature. You have to have the ability to sin, and it's part of perfections. It's good for free will creatures to be privy to certain temptations, and to, in the ideal world, to overcome them. Obviously, we know with Adam and Eve, they didn't. They succumbed, and through acrasia, or weakness of the will, they chose to eat the fruit, and that led to the fallen world. Now, in terms of the end state, Josh kind of said, well, it's the same in the end state. In the new heavens and the new earth, we'll also be able to, we'll be privy to temptations. We will still have the ability to sin. We just will never actualize it. And what is the difference between the pre-fall and the end fall? Well, we've gained experiential knowledge of what it means to sin, right? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What type of knowledge? It's not propositional. It's talking about experiential knowledge that was gained. But I just want to, just for the sake of the audience, I want to provide that there is another alternative for the end state. Maybe we do lose the ability to sin, and we're no longer privy to temptation. So Roman Catholics, for example, believe that we're kind of crystallized, right? We freely choose to be justified and enter that sanctified state. And upon the new resurrection, we become crystallized. We're morally determined from that point on. And that seems equally plausible to my mind. So yeah, either Josh is correct. That's what I was open to and what I used to believe until that bugger Phil Bear changed my mind about God being morally determined. So now I'm open to the possibility. Maybe we, in the end state, maybe we become morally determined as well, but we're determined through our own free choice in this fallen world and stuff like that. So either option works for me, kind of thing. Yeah.
Right on. Let's continue, guys.
Went to heaven. So I couldn't help but ask myself and ask God then, why wouldn't he have just created all of his elect with this perfect nature without any temptation to sin at the very beginning? Why did he instead put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in their path and let Satan corrupt them? The best answer that I could come up for that was maybe God just wanted to test us and see which people would choose to love him and which wouldn't, so that
I just want to say, am I like foretelling the future? Like the answers that I give seem to be okay. That's what she's talking about. As soon as we go on, so
All right.
I'll just say see my previous answer, Miss.
Yeah, well, this comes also down to, does this mean that God is not all powerful? And I think no, it means that reality does have consequences, that freedom has consequences. You either violate the laws that govern reality or experience the freedom through the laws of reality, right? God sets the laws and boundaries that are best suited for free agents to live in, right? I think that provides the best way to experience the goodness for all his creatures, right? He did his job and gave us the responsibility through freedom to do just that. So, however, the fact that free moral agents have a choice entails that we may not make the right choice, and I think that is just a fact of reality that he gave us. So, a lot of times, like I said, this goes in so many different directions. But yeah, I hear you, Dale. That's funny that you said that.
Yeah, awesome.
This is interesting. I personally have, for a while, and maybe you guys can push back on this, help me think even more about it. I don't know, but for years now, probably I've stopped, as Wesley as I am, as Arminian as I am, I've stopped using the language of talking about like myself or other humans as free will agents. So I've distinguished, and I've been very purposeful about distinguishing between free will on the one hand and freedom of choice on the other hand. And so I have argued that, in fact, God is the only free will being in existence. That is, he's the only being who can will something to happen, and it happens. Like, I can't just will something to happen, and it happens. Like, I got to do something to make it happen. So I have a freedom of choice to try to make something happen, but I can't just will something to happen, and it does. So I can throw that out there on the table if you guys want to discuss it. If not, but that's an interesting point for me in this discussion.
That's actually that's a really great question. Actually, that's a really great question. Go ahead, Dale. You can go first.
Yes. Okay. So I think that I disagree. I definitely purposefully use the free will agent terminology.
Sure.
Originally, I thought you were going someplace else, like the difference between free will and free agency. That's a Calvinist term, right? To distinguish that. But with what you're saying, I think the mistake that you're doing is thinking that, well, you're only free willed if you can actualize an alternate possibility. And I don't think that's what's required for the ability condition, right? It's what's required is the ability to will to do, or to refrain from doing. Whether or not you can actualize your will is irrelevant, right? So I can will to pop up an ice cream cone right in front of me. I can't actually do it, but I have the freedom of will to will for that, or to refrain from willing to do that, or something like that. Does that help? Does that make sense? Or
yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but certainly your explanation makes sense. I don't know if the actualization portion of that is the only sort of thing that I'm wrestling with, or I've been wrestling with, or dealing with there. But yeah, so freedom of choice. I'm thinking like, I have a freedom of choice when deciding what I want to wear today. I can choose from a variety of clothing options available in my wardrobe. Free will, right? When I decide to help a stranger in need, I guess free will is at play in the sense that my decision is seen as an autonomous choice, and it does reflect my capacity for empathy or kindness, or whatever you want to call it. And those, I think, are all independent of deterministic factors. But I guess maybe freedom of choice, in giving those examples, the difference is the practical ability to choose among different options whereas free will, I'm talking about like this intrinsic ability or capacity to make autonomous decisions that bear moral responsibility for their actions. So, but I do think that what you're saying, the actualizing, that is a part of it, no doubt. Yeah.
Well, let me stab at it too, because I think that Dale's making a good point, but it's still kind of like you said. It's like it's missing the piece. If I could give some really short and concise definitions that break down what free will means in the libertarian sense versus what you seem to be describing, Michael, is actually a claim to aseity, right? Which is a power that's utterly distinct from being embodied as a human creature. Having aseity is what God has. There's nothing. He is the source. He doesn't need a source. He has no contingencies. We have contingencies. And so we don't have a claim to aseity, right? And in that distinction, we are not like God, because God can do exactly what you described, can will something into existence, right?
That's right.
And then can change situations based on his desire, because he has the capacity and the power and the apparatus to do so. But what we would mean by free will, and not everybody would articulate it this way, but I think in the most concise definition that I can give, the will as a noun rather than to will for something, which is a verb. The will as a noun is the faculty of the mind to mediate between different affects, influences, desires, so forth, right? And so I have a faculty of mind that is capable of mediating between all the potentials, right? And that thing that mediates is the will. What we mean by free.
What is going on?
What are you guys doing? What we mean?
David started it.
I don't even. I wasn't even watching. So anyway. So what we mean by free, specifically in the libertarian sense, is that we are our will, our faculty of mind to mediate between the different causal powers that are, or influential powers that are present. That will is not bound by causal necessity to do one thing or another because of antecedent conditions. That's what the freedom amounts to. It's not a superpower to deliver upon everything that we should desire in the way that God has that capacity to bring about his will without any fetters. There's nothing to stop him. He has that aseity, right? We don't have that aseity, but we do have the communicable attribute of not being bound by causal necessity. And we have that faculty of mind to mediate between the different influences that we're working with, our scenario, our situation, our upbringing, our biology, and so on. And so I think the thing that you're saying with freedom of choice is in fact the nuance that we would mean by saying freedom of the will, because the will remains free. I can will to fly. I simply cannot deliver on my will because I lack the apparatus.
Yes.
And so I think that's the piece missing.
Okay. Yeah.
I really think that also, the whole aspect of freedom exists between the bounds of a reality, right? So I think that has to be taken into consideration when you're trying to categorize things like this, and when you're categorizing something like God and his aseity. I do agree with Josh. I think that definitely needs to be taken into account and how that applies. I mean, it's really interesting stuff, and it's real deep. We could probably spend a whole show on it.
Can we just all agree? Can we just all agree that libertarian free will is so much more than just not being forced to do something? This is what I hear so many people talking about. Well, this is how we define free will, is not by being forced to do something. Free will is literally an energy of God that is bestowed upon us in order to participate and co-create and redeem, co-create, everything that God does within this world with him synergistically. That's mind-blowing to me, that the God of the universe would bestow those properties to us. It just blows my mind. We were talking about this with Dr. Nathan Jacobs today. Again, if anybody saw that, we apologize for the technical difficulties. But the way he describes the essence and energies is completely baffling to me, in the sense that these are the things that we participate in with God. Like, how cool is that? Anyway.
Well, yep. Again, we welcome Tyler to the broadcast. Thanks for coming on, buddy. We are, we love to have you. And yes, we are Faith Unaltered, and we mess with each other on Faith Unaltered. We tease each other,
and we cut each other off mid-sentence. Look at that.
Yeah, we sure do. And Tyler's in his favorite spot. So, yeah. But anyways, guys, yeah,
that's right. I am.
I do have a question from the audience. I do want to play that or put that up on the screen for us. How would you guys respond to an atheist who asked, why would we all deserve hell for simply being born? Who wants to take a stab?
Hold on. Put that back up.
Sure.
Real quick. How in the world would you guys respond to an atheist who asks, why would we all deserve hell for simply being born? We wouldn't.
Yeah. I don't know anybody that actually makes that case.
Now, there's probably a lot of nuance behind that, like a theological presumptions and stuff like that.
It's like original sin, right? Like we're born guilty for Adam's sin, I think is what they're getting at. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
I take
go ahead.
we're not. We're guilty when we sin, kind of thing. That's my answer.
Thank you. There you go.
An answer I used to give when I believed in total depravity, even as a non-Calvinist. It's a weird view, but like I believe that we chose before we were born, our souls existed, and we chose to adopt the sinful nature or something, and that in itself was a sin. So that's a weird answer that nobody else gives, but that
was a heretical answer of pre-souls existing before being
the soul
born.
came into existence from conception, but yeah, at some point after it came into existence, I had thought we chose to adopt the sin nature, and that in itself was a sin. Again, that's a weird answer kind of thing, but the point is now I think the true answer is we're not born guilty of a sin. We only once we commit a sin are we guilty, but that's just another option.
I really do think environment does play a cause in this as well that we don't consider. That I do think that there's things that do pass on from being human, like our DNA. I mean, we have RNA, junk DNA, they used to call it. Now it serves a purpose, but I do think humans pass things on to each other, right? Does that make us guilty for sin and deserve hell? No. Again, that's where my idea of depravity would be a lot nuanced than the Calvinists. So
I wasn't laughing at you, David. I was laughing at this goofy comment right here from Tyler that you should know better, bro. Like, you should know better. If you've done any type of historic research on Christianity, every single father up until possibly Augustine, and maybe even it's debatable that he didn't hold to a strict determinism like you did whenever you were a Calvinist, or still do, I don't know. But every single church father that we have held to libertarian free will. It starts with Pseudo-Dionysius, Justin Martyr, all the way through the Cappadocians. Like, come on, dude. This is just absurd. I'm sorry, but I saw this and I had to call this out. This is ridiculous. Goofy.
And Yahoo,
Goofy
I would
stuff.
say
I'm
my
sorry.
thoughts exactly. My thoughts exactly on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yahoo.
is
I
good.
like that. Not Yoo-hoo, which is one of
Yahoo.
my favorite drinks, but Yahoo. Sorry, dude. I'm in a good mood tonight. So,
Hey,
But
Yoo-hoo
yeah,
destroys me, bro. I can't do it.
do what? What'd you say,
Yoo-hoo
Mike?
destroys me, bro. I can't do Yoo-hoo. I'll pay for it if I try to drink one of those.
Oh, no.
uh,
Well,
but yeah, let's move on, guys, because we still got a lot to get to.
where are we at? What have
who
we done,
chose to love him
David?
and punish the
never
people
mind.
who chose not to. But then
I'll pause it here. We've been basically going
What?
over the video on free will, and the whole free will argument. This is the nicest video that we have tonight.
Have we got to my
there-
girl yet?
No,
The
we
one I
haven't.
said.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, we haven't got to her. We'll get to her next. You're
Awesome.
talking about Atonement Girl, right?
The one that I said that I've got a lot
Yeah,
to say about.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get to her next. She's the next one up.
All
But yeah, there's where we've been discussing, the whole notion of free will. This girl deconstructed and now is reading the Bible for the first time, so all the way through. So we did discuss that. We do have some issues with that. So, but anyways, let's continue on, guys.
Wondered why an omniscient God would need to give his creation a test to see which ones would love him when he could just look into the future and know what would happen without having to harm anybody. I can understand God's incentive for creating people, a family to share time with, creative collaboration. I can conceive of that. I can conceive of how God wanted to create people not because he was lonely, but because he just wanted company. What I couldn't conceive of is him wanting to do that in a way that would end up harming a bunch of people. I wondered why he wouldn't have come up with a different way in order to avoid all that and just give him what he wanted, which is company. Even in my little, human pea brain, I can comprehend how you could have chosen a way to get what you want without having to hurt people. And yeah, that's something that still stumps me.
All right. So again, I think the thought process is broken here. She assumes a definition of omniscience and omnipotence that I think are just not viable. I don't think you can make something good and free without the potential of it going wrong. However, you can create something with the possibility of it going wrong, and if it does, having a way to remedy and defeat that through freedom and choice, which is exactly what God does, in my opinion. He can show us our faults so we can correct them and progress to a point where those things are no longer our desires. So he also satisfies, I think, the penalty that would exact the justice required for those that violated and abused the freedom that we're given. So anybody else?
I think that there's a glaring gap in her conception here, that she doesn't see humankind having a purpose in God's eyes. She doesn't believe is the wrong word. It sounds like she's never heard that mankind is made in the image of God. And she went, I wonder what that means. That there's no teleology in God's mind about man. There's no purpose. It was just divine fiat to make man. And whatever they did, was just kind of an afterthought. And if God wanted something to go a certain way, he could just kind of peek into his cheat sheet and see what was going to go on and kind of bypass the whole thing. Like, man was made in God's image to represent God to creation from the beginning. And in the end, we will be reconciled to the perfect image of God, which is the Christ. And in him, we'll have an eternity to properly image God. And we will have dominion over the cosmos. Again, just as Adam should have had in the garden, we'll have in the ultimate garden, all of creation, right? That is the end of man. That was the beginning of man. The midpoint that we are in is an inconvenient point in history comparatively, but it doesn't seem like any of this framework of the through line of purpose was actually in any of her thought here. It was more so God seemed to want like imaginary friends, but he didn't want them to be imaginary. So he gave them flesh bags, and then they didn't do what he wanted in his game. And so, why didn't he just change the game? It's so two-dimensional.
Yeah. Wait, that's not Christianity?
Not today.
Not today, sucker.
Yeah, the idea that God created because he wanted company also fails to understand the Trinitarian nature of God, right? God's already got company. He's a triune God. It's just I don't know if this is getting off topic or not, but I'm very interested as a rhetorician in the rhetorical nature of the video, not in what she's saying, but what she's doing. One, the whole rhetorical context. She's Susie Homemaker kind of context, and how that is speaking rhetorically about to reinforce what she's saying or even undermine it. I'm really curious to hear what you all are picking up on from the rhetorical context in that sense, like the way the video is produced, and like she's fixing the pillows and pouring Tide in the washer. Like what is being conveyed by that rhetorically? If you all are willing to go there for a minute.
I think what she's doing, like performatively, is to show like an everydayness and kind of invite you in. So it's something that makes it feel informal and welcome and casual. And so it gives the aesthetic of, hi, come into my home, sit down, have a cup of coffee with me. We're friends. It's okay. I'm going to tell you the truth. You can trust me.
Yeah, I agree with Josh on that wholeheartedly.
And do you think it works? I mean, not that you agree with it, but do you think for her audience?
I do.
Yeah, I do. I absolutely.
Even as somebody who's actively disagreeing with her right now, she seemed like a really nice person, and I probably would want to hang out and have coffee.
And when you see some of these other videos, you'll see how much more impactful her thought process is versus the next ones. You'll see the difference. Dale, do you have anything to add before I throw this question up?
I think he's talking.
Really. I mean, in terms of the style, yeah, like you guys basically said it. I think she's presenting a very casual, everyday kind of thing. Like, I guess just like trying to convey this is just common sense. This is easy to get if you're not brainwashed or don't have a preconceived Christian bias. Like, this is just the obvious truth that, common sense. I guess that's what I get from it.
Like it's so easy to understand that somebody who's like fluffing pillows and doing laundry can get it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Live, laugh, love, and go apostate.
Before we answer Tyler's question here, I just got a question for David real quick, and for you guys, anybody else wants to jump in on this as well. Do y'all see these videos? And David, you've been doing this, you've been researching these videos, so I'm just curious if you see a trend in the videos. But do all these seem just very, I don't know, surface level to you guys?
A lot of them.
What do you
a
think?
lot of them, yeah. And matter of fact, those that have done a lot of great study that I've seen revert back to the common questions they probably argued against. I see a regression, and to me, that's where the volitional line is drawn.
Right.
They begin hashing questions that they even already answered and thought about, and were in agreement of it, in agreement with it, but yeah, that's pretty much where I've seen a lot of this entail. But yeah.
Can I say too, I mean, the rhetorical situation is always fascinating to me, and I don't want to go on too big of a tangent, but I agree with everything you all are saying about like the everyday homemaker. Like, it's that easy to get. Another thing that I think is going on there, because for the entirety of that video, she is putting things in order, right? She goes to the closet and gets clothes, and then she's washing them, she's fluffing the pillows, and she's doing all this, and it's sending like the message sort of subliminally that, or reinforcing it at least, that she has put her theological thoughts in order the same way. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's part of the narrative structure that Josh always talks about. It provides a basis for storytelling.
Yeah.
It provides that, I think,
Sorry if I got us off track there.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think it's all part of it. I think you're right to point that out, because that's not something that we were pointing out. We were dealing with the arguments. You were dealing with the backdrop that gives people the comfort that they need when they're identifying with her, which, identifying is a big aspect to development,
What's cool too is that actually the next episode of Cosmic Corner that I'm doing is going to be identity in relation to ritual and beauty, and what she was doing was ritually beautifying her house.
Absolutely.
So she was inviting you to participate in the ritual.
Yep.
And so she's doing a very liturgical thing by inviting you to participate in the ritual, and then telling you why ritual is rooted in something that's a farce, while using ritual to appeal to your senses.
Is God good and free, folks? If yes, can he go wrong? That's Vela's comment to us.
Yeah,
and I would take a stab and say, of course not. God's completely different creature than we are. Yes, he's good and free, but we are finite creatures that have to progress to a point where we can overcome sin. So,
is God free to do bad? That's Vela's question in essence.
So
Go
I'm going
ahead.
to give an answer that I think Tyler Vela will be interested in, because I was actually on his show, the Free Thinker podcast, and I gave an answer then where I've now changed my mind. So I used to answer yes, right? It's logically possible for God to sin or to lie or something like that, right? Now, I did a debate on that with Phil Bear, and in preparing for that debate, I realized I was just wrong. So I would say that God, from a moral perspective, is determined. No, he's not free. So I've kind of changed on that, and that might be interesting for Tyler Vela, because, like I said, when I was on his show, I gave the answer yes, and now that's totally the opposite. So yeah.
So what is God determined by? Himself, his nature, his essence?
Yeah, he has to be determined by his own nature. It's something internal to God, and I would say it's his own nature, right?
So then would it be self-determination?
That would probably...
No, I think it would just be an ontological fact, right? Because of who he is, right? It would exist on something of that plane. That would be my answer.
So it's nature. So I'm free, and yet I'm not able to fly, let's say, because being free is not about having unlimited possibilities, right? Being free, as we all know, and as Vela knows, is either I having contrary choice options or the leeway, right, effect, or B, being self-determining. And so that's why I asked specifically, if this is a self-determining thing, then that sounds like libertarian freedom to me.
Yeah, I think it's quickly going to go into the weeds.
We'll get way into but no, honestly, like I said, I stand by the ontological aspect there. So, but and I think that these definitions have a lot more to them than what we sometimes think of them as, like you were saying, Tyler. We know that freedom is, there's more to freedom than just what you define it as or what some people perceive it as.
Right.
But yeah, I do want to put this up as well. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you, Evie. God does not need company. The Trinity is perfect. God did not need to create mankind to be complete. Absolutely.
Yeah. The leeway condition. That's what I was thinking of. I don't know why I said effect. But no, to me, it's just God is good. God is free. And yet God cannot sin. I don't see the wrench that, the monkey wrench that gets thrown in there.
Yeah, I think it would be like kind of like parallel to asking, God exists, can God not exist? Like I don't know that the question has much meaning ultimately.
Right. And that's where Vela goes, which is why I was like, wait, God's determined? I don't think so, but anyway.
So
Dale,
to
how would
round
you
off
answer?
Huh? Oh, what was that?
I was just asking how Dale specifically would answer this then, because that's...
And this is the last one before we move on.
Yeah. This is where Vela's going to go. So God's determined by his nature, but we're not determined. So how does that work exactly?
Yeah, that's what I meant by quickly going into the weeds.
Well, yeah, right. I'm just curious.
Backwoods swamp.
I don't want to detract. I'm just curious.
So what's the question? Like how is it we're not determined, but when God is morally determined?
Yeah, God is determined by his nature, but humans aren't. Like, how does that work out exactly?
Well, yeah, so it's basically, the reason I answer this way is because it's based on how I ground the principle of alternate possibility, or the ability condition. And as I argued with Tyler, for creatures, for human beings, there is a logically possible world where we could do otherwise, where we freely choose as an actualized agent with a free will to do something else than what we do in this world. Mm-hmm. Now, with God, so for example, we choose to lie versus tell the truth or something like that. Yeah. Now, with God, I realized that he exists in every single logically possible world with his will that actually exists and everything like that. So by definition, yeah, he's actually morally perfect and actually chooses to do good in every single possible world. There is no logically possible world where God could do otherwise and lie. And because I realized that, there is no grounding for a alternate possibility where God lies, and that's where I'm like, okay, I'm wrong. Yeah, God must tell the truth in every single logically possible world. Creatures don't exist in every single logically possible world, so we can ground. Uh, you know, there's a logically possible world where I lie or I sin or do something like that. I do other than I do in this world, so it's pretty easy to ground that.
Okay.
So
I'm just curious. Go ahead.
So
Tyler, if you want to have a conversation with us, any open mic, you're more than welcome. So
and if you want to schedule something, we can always schedule a specific thing. You know, we're open to that, and we'd be willing to have that discussion with you, buddy. So here's the next video.
Jesus for the sins of others is not justice, and that's what your theology teaches. That's how every single person who gets into heaven, because God punished Jesus for their sins.
Tyler?
No, he didn't. The Eastern Orthodoxy, and now I know we're probably gonna disagree, but for the sake of unity, let's just say this. Let's say this. So leaving PSA off the table, which I don't hold to, by the way, but leaving PSA off the table, there are so many other reasons why Christ was crucified and why Christ died, right? The main one that I hope we would all agree on is the idea of the restoration condition. So we are made in the image of God, and we know that that has been corrupted by sin, right? By the fall. And so one reason that Christ died is to restore us back to what we once were. This is the main reason why people go to heaven, because once you envelop in a relationship with God, you are now participating in God, right? We all are participating in God, but in a covenant way. And part of those covenant, what I call benefits, are to be made more like Christ. Not only to be saved, to be justified, but to be sanctified in a way that actually transforms us. This is the restored icon model, what it normally goes by. And this is something I would hope that we could all agree on, whether or not we debate about PSA or not. There are multiple reasons why Christ died on the cross. That doesn't have to involve punishment, of which I don't agree with anyway. So I'll leave that on the floor for everybody.
Yeah, I'd say some of those other reasons. Yeah, I think this sort of one-pronged look at it is very problematic. So good on you for pointing that out, Tyler. I think too, to defeat sin and evil, right? The reconciliation of humanity is a big one. To give us everlasting life, to show His obedience to the Father, to offer us sanctification, right? To bring forth a new covenant, to give us, to break down dividing walls, to fulfill the law, to make intercession for us, to bring peace. Like there's tons of reasons why why this happened, not just this one. And I know evangelicals tend to focus on this one, just the forgiveness of sins. But I think it is really wrongheaded and scripturally malnourished, if I could say it that way, to carry just this one view that that there's one reason Jesus did this.
Just real quick, just to add to this, for anybody that's interested, go read Athanasius on the Incarnation, and he lists out two of which I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know he lists out 3 reasons why Jesus died publicly on a cross, and one of them was to show that the resurrection was true. And so if Jesus would have died in secret or by natural causes or whatever, then the resurrection might not have been believed as it was. But you see Jesus publicly hanging on a cross that by Romans that stabbed him with blood and water flowing out, as the eyewitness testimony tells us. Like, he's dead. There is no swoon theory at that point. There is nothing other than resurrection, and that's one of the reasons St. Athanasius gives in his book on the Incarnation. Another church father, if anybody's interested, you can read, is St. Gregory Nazianzus, his letter to Cleodius. Cleidinus. I'm horrible with pronunciation, so my bad, guys. But check out Gregory Nazianzus and Saint Athanasius on the Incarnation. They give multiple reasons why Christ died on a cross that does not involve punishment.
And also check out some of our previous episodes available on Faith Unaltered that are relevant to atonement theories. You're welcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Caleb
And
Mullins and
Will
Hess we had an interview with. Go ahead,
we do have a little nuance. I mean, each of us, I think, have a different view of this. I mean, I do hold the PSA, not in certain areas. Obviously, I think it's multifaceted, right? So I think God's absolute justice requires a payment. Absolutely. I think that you can't ignore that legal language in the Bible, which I would say I don't think he can simply choose to overlook it, because I think it lowers God's absolute standard of justice. But to say it's just purely this punishment type idea, I don't like that. I think it's antithetical to the absolute nature of God.
Right.
I think such arbitrary forgiveness is unreasonable and probably thus not feasible. But to say that it's not a debt, I think, is where we would probably get into some different waters on when we discuss this. I think the guarantor is a real idea in first century Judaism. I think Jesus also oftentimes talks about sin as accruing debt, and we see this even today amongst our own society. I mean, like, if I get a speeding ticket, no matter what I do or how hard I try to go under the speed limit, and correcting my speed, I still need to pay that ticket. You know, that ticket's still there, right? The price of sin is death and separation from God. However, it is just to allow Jesus to jump in and pay it for us. I think that's fine. Yes, Jesus, who has a better credit than I do, that is my guarantor, is the way that it's paid. I naturally can't do it because I don't have that type of credit, but Jesus does. So,
have you all on the screen here seen the videos? Like, do you know which videos are coming? Have you had some chance? No,
I've seen it just because Russell showed me right before we started. So
gotcha.
No, these come up randomly on my feed, Michael.
So
I save the ones I'm really interested in and I want to kind of respond to.
Well, I'm interested. It would be interesting to me to hear where you folks who haven't seen it think it's going. Like, I have a hunch that she's like going in the direction of like the divine child abuse argument.
Oh, yeah.
You'll see. Yeah, you're gonna see. This is it's worse.
She's gonna at least use the word victim twice, and I say that not seeing this. So I've never seen this video. We'll see what happens.
Now you've seen this one, right?
No, I haven't seen this one.
Oh, this isn't the one you wanted to speak on?
Okay.
So I'll give my answer, and my answer will betray where she's going to some extent.
Oh no,
she's kind of already said it, right? So, so again, I take a PSA view, so I'm fine with her with her assumptions that Jesus is being punished for our sins in our place as a substitute and stuff like that. So great, I'll agree with her on that. Now, as to the question, is that moral or immoral? I bet this person has no problem with concepts like vicarious liability and punishing an innocent employer for the misconduct of an employee. The law recognizes that. I bet she would be like, that's cool, that makes sense. Punish the corporations and go after the boss, right? So obviously we do have a precedent in everyday reality. Now, how does it make moral sense in terms of what God dying for our sins, right? Because vicarious liability in the law is done for practical or pragmatic reasons. God's not limited by that, so he should be upholding perfect morality. Well, how does he do that? It comes down to the justification for punishment. And there are two perspectives, and I don't take a retributionist perspective. I take a consequentialist perspective. So there are certain beneficial consequences, like redeeming the sinner, redeeming the victims of sin, deterrence, and quarantine and stuff like that. So in Jesus' case, when he pays the penalty or the punishment for our sins, he is able to apply the beneficial consequences, namely of redeeming the sinner themselves, when he dwells in our hearts and sanctifies us. This is something that doesn't apply, right? We can't redeem the character of a criminal by sending someone else to prison, because that person can't dwell in their hearts and redeem their character. With Jesus, he can. He does dwell in our hearts supernaturally and is able to bring about that beneficial consequence, the redemption of my character through sanctification, and apply that consequence from him undergoing the punishment in my place and then bring it to me. So that, in that case, that's perfectly moral. There's nothing immoral about that, and it makes perfect sense to me. So that's my kind of answer there. Yeah.
And Dale's just wrong. So, no, I'm just kidding. Inside joke.
Josh.
Sorry.
Tyler, that's one for Tyler. We all got a few to make Josh laugh today.
Tyler, you promised you were going to come in here and you had something for David Russell. I forget what it was, but you had a little saying for him.
Look, Dale, this is a family-friendly show. Okay.
We can say it off air. It's fine. We can roast each other all we want off air.
I wasn't planning on coming on. I just got a wild hair, and I was like, I'm going to join him real quick. And then my wife was like, oh, my God, and then ran away. So, sorry. I don't plan on being here very much longer, but yeah, she did. She allowed me.
So
Go ahead, Josh.
I think if I could try to take a stab at where I think she's going, I think what she's doing is trying to target a particular facet of what she thinks encompasses all of Christianity and play the same reductionistic game that atheists do with anything that has meaning and say it's just this, therefore it can be dismissed. That's what I think she's doing.
Well, guys, can I say something too? Is that I think we've seen this throughout the video, is people are trying to bring the ways of God to our level and just kind of cut it off there, like Josh is saying. God is omniscient, right? And if you're going to put your trust in a creator, right, and you're trying to understand these, I mean, the least we can do is try to give him the benefit of doubt and explore all the different aspects. I think that goes a long way in trying to find a good harmonization that would satisfy a lot of these questions. But the problem is when you bring it down to a finite level, an infinite to a finite, you're always going to run into problems.
Mm-hmm. How many times have we said it on here, especially about the atonement theory, whenever CSG was a thing, whenever poor was a thing, and now is faith unaltered? How many times have you heard David Russell, myself, and Joshua Davidson say, do not hold to just one theory of the atonement? Like, the atonement is an umbrella that a lot of different models fit underneath. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. This is the problem. This reductionist perspective of limiting it to one thing and one thing only. So you take away that, you find something to criticize about that. You think it's good to go, and you think you've criticized the entire doctrine. It does not work like that whenever you have a multifaceted atonement theory, guys. It don't work.
Right.
So good job, David. That was good.
All right, let's move on, guys.
That is not justice. And if that's what your God needs to feel like justice has been done, then your God is a monster. Because all that is craving suffering. It's needing an outlet for your anger, even if the recipient had nothing to do with the crime. A God that wants that is evil. The entire concept of Jesus dying for our sins is monstrous. You worship a monstrous God. You defend a monstrous theology. You accept a monstrous gift of salvation. No system that confers a guilty person's punishment onto an innocent person is good. It's not just, and it's certainly not deserving of worship.
It's monstrous. Dang it! If I would have said monster, she would have said victim 500 times.
All right, so was God sick to... Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say her voice reminded me of those videos of that girl who makes coffee and various fruits and vegetables and stuff with the little mixer. Coffee, caramel, coconut milk. It's so funny.
Except her vocabulary didn't expand.
I was thinking of the SPCA commercials, which show the poor dogs first, and then yes. Does this dog deserve this type of life?
I'm Canadian. I don't get any of these commercials. I have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, you don't even have commercials in Canada. You don't even have TVs.
She reminded me of the person that calls you at 3 o'clock in the morning and says, "Hey, just calling you to remind you about your car's extended warranty."
All right, let's stop making fun. All right, let's go. Was God sick to exact needless violence on Jesus to achieve this? Needless. I would say two things here. From freedom, we have love, right? And perfect love requires perfect justice. Okay, so sin is truly vile, and we are so fortunate we had Jesus that stepped in and gave us so much more than just debt forgiveness, right? So there I am going, for my PSA, and part of the multifaceted aspect, right? So because we were the ones, this is the key. All right. People talk about God punishing. But weren't we the ones that killed God? We had a perfect healer come to this earth.
Exactly.
Right? We had a perfect man that healed people. That said, you have a disease, come to me. We had perfect knowledge. We had the truth incarnate, and we crucified him. Where's our responsibility in that aspect? God did this. God inferred the punishment. We killed the Christ.
I don't know about we. I didn't have nothing to do with that. I'm just saying.
Oh man, but you know what?
I know what you mean.
How would we react today?
Jews
if he came today, let's say 2,000 years didn't happen, and he came today. I think the same thing. Man loves darkness rather than light. I don't know, man. We had the healer, we had a preacher of love, goodness, and we condemned him. But through that, he knew what he'd have to endure and did it anyway. He allowed it to happen. He knew it was going to happen. He knew he was going to the cross. That's plan A. The plan A was going to the cross, man. Mm-hmm. Not to mention Jesus is God, which I'm sure one of you are willing to go and light that torch and comment on that. I'm not even going to, I'll let you guys handle that. Jesus is God. Okay. There is so much more that can be said about this, but I'm going to leave it there. I said enough. Y'all see where I'm coming from. I think the audience does. The audience gets it. So go ahead, guys.
I was going to say to build off your comment on responsibility, the responsibility for the death of Christ in terms of the execution was man, but the responsibility that Christ took in becoming man and laying on himself the burden of man's fall and bringing about their redemption was God himself taking responsibility for the state of things in the most ultimate sense. Christ was not an isolated incident of some hapless, person who happened to just be in the wrong place at the wrong time and got off by a mob of crazy, angry people. Yeah. Christ gave himself over. That's like, it doesn't seem like, again, this is almost like the last one. It doesn't seem like any of the framework that's actually laid out in scripture was relevant to the objection at all. What she did was caricature one facet of something, draw out of it the most unfavorable characteristic possible, and then pretend like nothing else needs to be brought in order for objection to hold water. But it doesn't. Like it doesn't hold water like at all. And even in her like faux outrage whisper, she ended up saying something like, okay, God's a monster because he desired this thing. He's angry and he needs an outlet for that anger. How monstrous. Lady, you sound angry and you're on a video letting your anger out on hapless victims who have nothing to do with you and your frustration. And so are you monstrous for that? I don't think you would say so. I'm not saying you are a monster. I think you're frustrated and more power to you, but that doesn't translate well to your point, right? Mm-hmm. Like what you're doing is bemoaning the exact thing that you're doing on a larger scale and then pretend like you have the cosmic authority to be upset and God doesn't. And it's weird.
Yeah. I think too, to piggyback on that, it's you mentioned he wasn't just, it wasn't an accident. He wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it also wasn't coercion. There wasn't divine coercion going on here. God the Father wasn't, and God the Spirit, they weren't forcing God the Son to do this. This is a voluntary sacrifice. So I think to that point as well.
You
Yeah,
see,
sin was a grenade that was thrown, and Jesus jumped on it. You know what I mean?
you
Anyways,
see
go
Christ.
ahead.
I don't know about that, but you see Christ.
I'm just saying, man.
Hey, I'll take it. But you see Christ in control, right? All the way through his ministry. He prophesies about the crucifixion. He tells us in John 10 that I lay my life down, no one takes it from me, right?
My
You
own
see
accord.
him, amen. You see him tell Judas, go and do what you have to do, knowing full well what it is he's about to do once Satan enters him. You see him in the courtroom in front of the high priest Caiaphas saying, I am the Son of Man, and you will see the Son of Man riding on the clouds whenever I come back. I know this is getting ready to happen, and I'm telling you right now, I'm going to rise from the dead, and whenever I come back, I'm going to be the Son of Man that Daniel prophesied about. Hundreds, thousands, whatever it was, years before Christ ever came. You see God in control of this all the way through. And he rose from the dead. And guess what, guys? He's at the right hand of the Father interceding for those who come to him in faith. And he's coming back.
Can I say too, like, everything this individual said, and by the way, Josh, your point about her own rhetoric betraying her point is brilliant. So kudos to you on that as well. But I think contextually speaking, like in ancient cultures, right, especially ancient Judaism, the notion of sacrifice, it wasn't. It was a sacred act, right? It wasn't understood as an act of abuse. It was understood as something sacred, and so Jesus's sacrifice, whatever model of atonement we want to talk about that within, right, I think needs to be understood, perhaps against some of that backdrop too, that this was a sacred act, not nobody would have viewed this as abuse.
Right. That's a good point, Mike.
Dale.
All right, Dale.
Nothing really to add. I think like my first response in the first round covers what I thought and provides my answer towards that. So yeah,
Moving
I
on.
think so too. I just wanted to make sure I gave you the chance so you didn't feel offended because you're.
Whoa, that's the line, David.
No, just kidding.
Like everything else you've ever said to offend Dale, that's the line. You're like, whoa, bro, I don't want to offend you on this one.
I did justify it by tell everybody what his name rhymes with. So, but
so far,
all right,
Friendly,
okay,
friendly.
look.
Pete, next.
No,
so
no,
far, Tyler's in the
this
lead.
is the one Tyler really wants to get to as well, and this is one that I'm going to go off on probably a little bit as well.
Oh,
so
here we go.
Welcome back to my series, Reasons Why I No Longer Identify as Christian, and buckle up because this one is going to be a doozy. I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers with this one, but just get through this with me, okay?
We'll get with it.
I was on the phone with my friend the other day, and they said to me, I'm really surprised that you're, still so passionate about deconstruction because you've been on this journey for years. Personally, I believe one's deconstruction journey, especially with indoctrination, never really ends. However, I'm just as passionate about it when I started as I am now. And they asked me why. And instantly, I made the connection. And I had never really thought about it before. The evangelical church taught me that I was a victim. They taught me that I was persecuted and to be joyful that I was persecuted.
That's the first one.
What? Whoa! That was the point. Like
that was
that
the
whole
first
minute.
part.
That.
No,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tyler. Go.
No, I just it took a long time to get to that. That's all I was gonna say. Go ahead.
First off, Christianity does not teach you that you are a victim. It does not. It doesn't teach you that you are persecuted. It does teach you that you can be persecuted, which is true for many types of worldviews or belief systems. It prepares you about how to react when persecuted, because guess what? How have we reacted in the past? Right? It doesn't make anything any better from how we reacted in the past. It ultimately makes things worse. What is with these people that deconstruct sometimes? I wonder. Instead of seeing anything good that came from their faith, they throw the entire baby out with the bathwater, it seems. I mean, what do you guys think? It teaches us how, I mean, Christianity doesn't teach us about being persecuted. It teaches us how to deal with persecution.
I was just going to say, like, maybe we should let her finish, like, because is this the second part that she's going to go into?
We got more. I mean, I can let it play for a little bit more. Just tell me where to stop.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious before you do that. Like, I don't know. I mean, what she says, evangelical church. Like, okay, that. Tell me what you mean by that.
Right.
What are we talking about? And is this a denomination? Was this a non-denominational? Was this your local backwoods rural church? Like, what do we even mean by that? And yeah, so I guess maybe I need more context.
Yeah.
The amorphous American church. Yeah.
All right. Oh, my bad.
My persecution and my oppression made me closer to God. It validated that I was chosen and I was doing something right. But then I grew up and I realized that the religion that I was a part of was the oppressor in this country.
Pause.
That's where we gotta stop. Yeah, I mean, you see what I mean by baby in the bathwater, like a system that allows for all sorts of things that I end up becoming relative and unsound. I mean, so bad that they end up losing the justification and standards that set us apart, and make us civilized. So I mean, this is the system that put men on the moon. This is the system that set ethical standards that cause us to progress. So I mean, when these people deconstruct, it's like they trade the fact for feeling, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
open minds are at the end. Open minds are like open mouths. They exist to bite down on something solid, like Chesterton said. And he also says, fallacies are still fallacies, even if that said fallacy is fashionable. We aren't persecuted. Okay. Tell that to the bakers that their conscience were violated when they were selling their talent to someone that they morally disagreed with. Yeah, we might not be persecuted like we were in the first century. Fine. That may be foreign to us as it is to you that we are the oppressors. But for crying out loud, like, you're complaining on TikTok and probably have never missed a meal in your life. I'm sorry.
So first of all,
it gets me
you're good.
Going.
You're right, first of all. But the thing of it is, guys, she totally flipped the script. She was not going where I thought. Now, this wasn't the video that I was talking about. But in a world, and it sounds like, she's from the States. Maybe I could be wrong on that, but just going by like what she's saying and how she's saying it per se.
Yeah.
She sounds like she's from the States, but in this society that we live in, we're taught to be glorified as a victim, right? Everybody's a victim in this world. And she's saying, well, the church was telling me that, and then I grew up. Like, whoa, flip the script on me, because, lady, I don't know what church you were going to, but it doesn't sound Christian. We are never, ever told to glorify our persecution, right? This is something that is foreign to the Bible. What are we told to do whenever persecution comes? Well, if you read Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells us to flee. Flee the city. Pray that your flight won't be on a Sabbath or in winter, right? But if persecution comes, and don't go looking for persecution, but if it finds you, if you're trapped in the middle of that, my patron saint, Saint Polycarp, there's a story about him and his martyrdom that just gets me every time, right? And he's going before the Roman cohorts. He's being led there in chains, and you don't see him glorifying himself. You see him praying for the people who's leading him to his death, right? And you hear it, and in the story it says that St. Polycarp, and I can't remember if everybody else heard this or if this was just told to St. Polycarp, but it says, play the man, Polycarp, and stand up for what you believe in. That's what we are told to do, even in the midst of death, to stand for Christ. not to glorify persecution, not to be a glorified victim, right? That we're martyred for the government or we're martyred for, whatever. Our martyrdom only means anything if our martyrdom is for Christ, not for ourselves. And she's got it totally backwards.
Tyler, you know what's behind you, that flag behind you, is also what it's about. Right. Love your enemies.
Yep.
Why? Because the way we used to do it before, the way we handled persecution before was with revenge. It's with more bloodshed. It's with more evil.
Yeah.
Right.
We can't overcome evil with evil. We must overcome evil with good.
Yeah.
Can persecution bring you closer to God? Of course it can.
Absolutely.
If God loves his people, it makes sense that he would care and draw them close in times of trouble, especially if they're persevering against evil. Oh, you grew up. So the millions of grown people that have a different worldview than you, I guess they're not grown, right? So I guess, we're seeing tolerance at its best here. But anyways, I digress. I'm sorry. It gets me.
Yeah, in terms of this notion that Christians are the oppressor, we're not being persecuted, just by way of response, can I show a 5-minute video clip? It's a compilation kind of thing, it's a edited clip, so it's not a full video or anything like that.
If it's, I don't know, Dale. It's up to you, man. You can. It's going to take us off topic. 5 minutes is pretty long.
Yeah. Well, it's not off topic. I think it's addressing directly her point that Christians are not persecuted. So.
All right, go ahead.
Okay.
While he's pulling that up real quick, I'll just say Sean, I don't know, Ignatius kind of wanted to simply bring him closer to his God, to Christ. He knew he'd meet Christ in death. And so, with that being said, that's why
to die is gain.
Amen. To live as Christ and to die is gain.
So this guy's he went viral at this time, right? So this is in Toronto. I've met this guy, Pastor David Lynn. He should not be controversial at all. He says nothing offensive, nothing bad. He's just teaching straightforward Bible. And let's see if it's true that Christians aren't persecuted.
Every heterosexual has sinned. Every homosexual has sinned.
One God.
And sin is when we violate the laws of God and we go contrary to the things of faith. That's what sin is. You're actually blocking me from walking. I'm not coming in your face blocking you from walking. I'm allowed to walk freely in Canada, Toronto. Please, now you're assaulting me. Please. I'm trying to walk.
He's walking into us, actually.
I'm trying to walk. This is not love. I'm trying to walk. I'm trying to communicate and exercise my freedom of speech. Now you're trying to trick me? That's assault. It's funny. When people are mature and they actually really love somebody, then they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. They would allow people to walk on a public sidewalk, but I'm not allowed to walk on a public sidewalk. The laws of Canada apply to Church and Wellesley. The laws of Canada apply to Young and Dundas. So I'm here to tell you today, when we stop loving other people, what ends up happening is that people get hurt and people stop loving. And that's why God sent his one and only son, Jesus. He sent Jesus to show up. Okay, now you're talking. You're touching me. I'm here to tell you today that you deserve respect. It doesn't mean I agree with you, but every person is deserving of respect. I have the right to preach, sir.
You have the right to preach without your microphone on.
I have the right. We've dealt with this in court already. So what's going on, sir? What's really happening, sir? Because I was physically assaulted. I'm asking you to arrest me. You didn't investigate the assaults. I can tell you one by one. They're all here. Where did the lady go? The lady's right there. She assaulted me.
Turn this
if
off.
you want to issue a ticket for the bylaws, I'm more than willing. On what grounds? No one's causing a disturbance.
Because
by exercising freedom of speech. Take what I just said. People have been assaulting me and becoming bigots and hate speech against my religion.
So you guys are seeing that And look who, in the end,
Right side for everybody.
the preacher. All those homosexuals at church in Wellesley who were attacking this preacher got off scot-free because he was causing the disturbance by exercising his freedom of speech, his God-given rights that Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees and actually explicitly says God-given rights. So, yeah, it's a joke that we're not persecuted in this day and age. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to, that's my point.
Anybody else?
I saw that Michael unmuted. I wanted to.
Yeah, I certainly think we're persecuted, and outside of the West, we see it a lot. It's maybe even more intense and more frequent. But again, going back to the girls' video that we were listening to and viewing, I'm again interested in the rhetorical situation. She has the line where she says, "I was told this, this, and this," which is essentially just the rehashing of Marxism, right? I was, now I'm the oppressor kind of thing. But the rhetorical situation is fascinating to me because if you look at like the backdrop behind her, she says, but I grew up. And the room looks like maybe a college dorm room. I don't know, but it doesn't look like the room of a grown, like an adult woman, right? She actually hasn't grown up. If anything, she's regressed. And so I'm always just really intrigued by the rhetorical situation and how it's contributing to or detracting from what's actually being said. And so I think in this case, it seems to maybe contradict the idea that she's grown up.
Right. I think that's a fair point, that she's acting in a kind of immaturity by even thinking about it, framing it that way. But I found a huge chunk of irony in the fact that her emphasis was on the idea of victimhood, of being in a disadvantageous and helpless position, and then talking about oppression. All of these buzzwords happen to be something that is readily available in the political landscape, but the only reason we even care about them in the political landscape is because we live in a cultural milieu that was raised on Christianity, in which you should care for the orphan and the widow. You should look out for the oppressed. You should stand up for those who have been treated unjustly. You should rectify injustice by proactively seeking to be a help to those who need it, to stand up for minorities. It was Christians who led the abolition of slavery. It was Christians.
Oh, wait, we'll get to that, Josh.
But that's what I mean. It's like what she's pointing out is something that actually comes from the Christian worldview, and she's trying to flip it back as though it not only didn't come from the Christian worldview, but can be pointed like a gun at the Christian worldview. And it's very odd. Again, it's a very weird thing to do, but I think that irony might have just been lost on her, because she doesn't seem to be operating from a place where, again, none of these people seem to have ever had Christian counsel. It's very
but Josh, like I said, they throw out the entire baby with the bathwater, and then they get these standards of what is right and wrong, and they're just they totally lose justification for it, like you said, Josh, because they're arguing Christian ethics against the Christian. Which they don't believe in the Christian ethic. So why is oppression wrong to you? I know why it's wrong, but what's your justification for it? What's your standard of justice? I don't know where.
I think it'd be interesting to ask her. So why do you think oppression's wrong?
Right. I mean, absolutely.
Where does that come from?
Right. Yeah. But I digress. Let's move on, because I mean, we still got a little bit to go on this one.
And that messed me up so badly. I realized that my religion upheld the system of enslaved people. My religion was the reason why LGBTQ plus people could not get married, or were afraid of walking out of the house together without getting lynched.
I had to stop there because the Christians made it so that LGBTQ people couldn't not get married. I thought we didn't live in a Christian nation, right? This is, everybody's been saying, oh, this wasn't a Christian nation for so long. I think Josh did a great job at talking about the ethics, but also, why should the government at all be involved in marriage to begin with, right? Unless it is for the propagation of continuing that said country. We never stop people from being together. We never have. We are commanded to love and treat everyone with respect. We are to speak out against behaviors we deem immoral. Yes, absolutely. That's problem isn't that's also inferred on them. They don't think certain behaviors are correct, right? I think the problem is you do that by being a pro LGBTQ advocate, right?
Mm-hmm.
We say it is immoral behavior. You say it isn't. The law is usually reflected by the will of the people when it comes to these things. The people now have changed it, right? I mean, they have kind of shifted. Is that right or is that wrong? I'm not making any assumptions. But to say that we are oppressing people, well, no, not technically. If you look at the law in itself, we all had the same rights when it came to marriage. We all had the law equally applied to each and every one of us per the definition of marriage, right? So it wasn't a human rights issue. It was a definitional change that her side actually won. And Christians were responsible for lynching people.
Right.
Christians were lynching people. What Christian institution ever advocated lynching?
Right.
I would love some sources.
Straw man. It's a straw man fallacy.
It is. Absolutely. Go ahead, guys. I'm sorry. I take up a little on the mic. This one gets me hot.
I was going to say, it sounds like she is trying to indicate that she grew up in a world of evangelical Muslims. Because none of this actually corresponds to the Christian worldview at all, what she's describing, that they're the oppressors, that they're endangering the life of gay people and lynching them when they come out the door, or that they're the driving force behind slavery, which I'm actually finding satisfaction in the fact that I brought that up before she even said that the abolition movement, which, to be honest with you, I believe the first people to free the slaves were actually, ironically, the colonizing Britons. Those people were the Christians, abolished slavery there. And then very quickly, it all kind of spread throughout the Western world, the exact same movement. And so it's kind of weird that, again, I keep saying this is all very weird. It's very strange to me to hear people say things like this with the confidence of certainty, when it's like obvious to anybody who knows enough about it to engage the question that she hasn't said anything that actually makes any sense yet.
Yeah.
Shall we continue, or Michael, you got anything else, buddy?
Good.
I was taught that I was a victim when my religion was the only one represented in politics, and where policy that aligned with my religion was actively being pushed across a nation that prides itself on religious freedom. And coming to this reality disgusted me. So listen up if you are a Christian in America. You are not persecuted here. Sure, you can be criticized and critiqued, as you should be, but you are 100% in no way, shape, or form persecuted. You are not oppressed. In this country, you are the oppressor. You are the ones actively going against people's rights and free will to choose a different life. You are the ones that celebrate when a company has John 3:16 on the bottom of their cups, while simultaneously saying that Starbucks waving a pride flag is shoving ideologies down your throat. And I hope you know that in this country, you are the villains. You are the bad guys. And the only way for Christians to no longer have that reputation is for them to acknowledge that all the things that I listed exist. Can't wait to see how many people I'm gonna have to block. But anyways.
You are bad until you comply. Bad.
Right. It's so funny. She starts off talking about representation and stuff like that. This is, it's so funny that there are some deists' names on the Constitution that proves her point perfectly wrong. Considering by the time she was born, also that those in power were diversified. I mean, we have different people with different religions in office. I mean, it gets worse. She just got worse as the video went on. And it's kind of what I was saying at the beginning again. Like, you throw the baby out of the bathwater and you adopt whatever pundit you think sounds the best. And that, to me, gives her a different kind of victim mentality, right? Now she's part of the other side of fighting against her Christian oppressors. First, it was the secular oppressors, right? But now it's the Christian oppressors. So she's still playing the victim card. I mean, this worldview said I was a victim, and basically that worldview is now saying that I'm the victim, but I'm fighting against it now. But she's rising up, and she's speaking against that other side, but still absolutely playing the victim card. To me, it's nothing new under the sun, right? It's the same thing going on and on and on. And she's just repeating herself. She was part of an oppressive system. Now she's part of another oppressed system fighting against oppressors.
Well, it's her last words are interesting because she positions herself as the oppressor. I can't wait to see how many I'm going to block.
Right.
So she actually makes herself the victim and the oppressor, right? So people are going to come at me and they're going to attack me. I'm going to be the victim, but I can't wait to see how many people I get to block. Oppressor. Like, so she's trying to have that. She's trying to play both sides of the, issue when it's convenient to her. And that's what we've seen so much of, right? Especially in the LGBT community, that they know how to perfectly play the victim when it's good for them. But when the moment they have the ability to take power, opportunity to take power and become the oppressor, they play that perfectly as well. And if you go back into the 1980s and you read the book by Kirk and Madsen, After the Ball, this is part of the strategy that they lay out, that they roll out. Have you guys ever read that? After the Ball? Y'all need to read that book. They laid out step by step how to essentially make America gay affirming in the 80s. And it's been played perfectly to a T, that strategy they laid out. They wrote a few articles about it too, but that book gives you a step-by-step analysis of the playbook. And they've done it perfectly. They've pulled it off. And part of that, they talk about the strategy of playing the victim when it is appropriate for them to do so, and then seizing the power and using it when they can. And that's exactly what we see going on here.
Right.
So two things. One, she's a shining example of what I meant earlier by pendulum thinking. Right? Going from one extreme to another.
Right.
Because there can't be any like force of reason between. There is only one and the other, and this reductionistic dichotomization. I want to bifurcate the whole world.
Right.
And I want to land on one side of the trench I've dug or the other side. And then if I land on one side, I get to point the finger at you for being on the wrong side. But when I jump to the other side, I get to point the finger at you for being on the wrong side. And it's like, okay, well, you admit it, you were wrong, but try to talk as though you're infallible. The second thing is Chris Padeo is here. What's up, Chris? And he asked, what's the name of her TikTok account? The last girl that was there. Do you know, David?
Not off the top of my head, but there it is there. Oh, sorry.
Kaylee Savannah.
All right. So I just wanted to reiterate too the fact that in real life, for any type of civilization to exist, there has to be laws and rules, right? Otherwise, it is anarchy. I mean, that's what you would have. And do we even really know what that looks like total anarchy? I don't think so. I mean, there's always been this type of society where we have rules and regulations. You have to have laws because some things are truly not good for people. Some things that we do are really not good. And you aren't always going to agree on those laws. The fact that we live in a nation that prides itself on religious freedom and other freedoms, I think we're doing a pretty good job with this experiment in some aspects. We have done a good job in the past. We have made our mistakes. We have taken 2 steps forward and 2 steps back at times. Okay. Nevertheless, to say Christianity is an oppressor when in fact, it positively contributes to the overall wellness and success of a society, according to all meta-analysis, it's truly telling what she's getting at. The axe to grind is real. That's what it comes down to. They have an axe to grind, and Christianity is their target because they deconstructed from something. Maybe they did experience abuse. Maybe they did experience a bad church, a lack of information, a feel-good Christianity, to say. Maybe that's it. And I sympathize. I do. But instead of taking the pendulum route, like Josh is saying, why don't you really learn why you believe what you believe?
Because it takes a boatload of effort.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to take the risk of investment of your time and attention and everything else. It's very costly. It's a lot less costly to find the largest piece of the fragmented culture that we're in that happens to be the most culturally advantageous, and then latch yourself to that thing and use it as a club wielded against others. What you do is isolate one virtue from all the other virtues and then set it up as a turret by which you can attack all the other virtues. And that it doesn't make sense to do things like that. But in a culture that's become so jester-like, it's not odd anymore, really, or surprising that would be the kind of tendency or the movement that people are in right now, especially given the last, let's say, 2 to 3 decades of colleges transitioning away from education and toward an indoctrination, which is what she actually said she was opposing in the beginning of this, is that people are being indoctrinated. Yes, they are. They're being indoctrinated to think that activism is the highest moral good, and it is not. Complaining to your friends and neighbors about large-scale worldviews issues so that you can get moral brownie points with those people is not actually a moral good. It's actually a mask for the fact that you don't have any virtue usually. And so I would challenge this person to point their critique inward first and see where they land. And I think that probably wouldn't happen because there was a whole lot of self-satisfied certainty that was playing out behind her tone in the video. But if somebody who is like Dale's channel is, if somebody's a real seeker and you point out to them that what they're doing is what they're bemoaning, and they'll actually take that critique seriously, and then undergo the transformation and change of mind that would be necessary to fix that person, if convinced of the gospel, could be a wrecking ball for the kingdom. Because the kind of person that can look at things and with passion point out wrongdoing and be willing to face the public assault of at least the bad verbiage and angry comments that people have, that they're going to then willfully face that and deal with it, and then later on change their mind. They're going to then speak with the same passion, but with a newfound comfortability in the fact that when you're wrong, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you have an opportunity to be corrected. And somebody who can't be corrected will simply be wrong forever.
Amen.
Also,
Michael,
it's easier. Well, I was going to say it's easier. It's easier just to, I got to watch my language here. It's easier to just moan and complain about it. Well, my church did this, and maybe they did, maybe there was wrong teaching. It's not uncommon in churches. But if you've come to that realization, then stop making brownie point, as you're saying, videos, stop virtue signaling and go back and do something about it. Right? That's hard work, to go talk to the people who supposedly did this to you, and to bring about real change. Stop whining about it and go do something about it.
Right.
Like that's
the
hard
only
work.
that's the only way things really change anyway, is when you actually do something.
Yeah.
You know, the greatest evil prospers when good men do nothing. You know, but again, Michael, thanks for coming on with us. Michael from Glossa House. Just go ahead and do a plug there if you want.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you guys check out glossahouse.com, or if you want to check out the Glossa House TV channel over on YouTube at Glossa House. We're working with the Faith Unaltered folks, Josh and David and Tyler, and all these guys, and so we're just really thrilled about that. Started re-airing some of their episodes, and yeah, man, we're really excited about that. And so you can see some of that stuff over there too. So it's good to be on here with y'all. Glad you're doing this.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here with us, man. Josh, what do we got coming up on Cosmic Corner?
Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you to Michael for hopping on also. And it would be cool to have you on a Cosmic Corner episode if you're willing to do that in the future.
Yeah, let me know, man. Just let me know.
Because I have a feeling that some of the things that you mentioned and some of the questions that you asked, I feel like we would jive really well. Just throwing that out there. But on the 21st of this month, okay, for sure. On the 21st of this month, I'm going to be doing the next Cosmic Corner discussion. We're going to be continuing our discussion on identity. But this time it's going to be in relation to ritual and beauty, which and ironically came up earlier. But what we're going to be talking about is in the first place, why ritual is a human universal, why beauty is something to be pursued, and then why those things reflect back on both the receiving and the expressing of identity. And so if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, and by the way, I'm not going to be doing this in a political framework in the slightest. And so if you're tired of the political conversation, but you want to think about the same things that the political world is complaining about, but you're tired of the two-dimensionality of it, come hang out with me on the 21st. It's gonna be a fun time.
Right on. And tomorrow, guys, we've got a special edition coming up on Real Seekers. I will be co-hosting with my friend Dale that you saw earlier. And we will actually be interviewing Paul Copan, who was the author of the book Is God a Moral Monster? So if you want to check that out, jump over to Real Seekers. It will be airing there. We might upload it to here later on and at a later date. But yeah, join us and we'll have a lot of fun.
Hey, on another note, I know I interrupted you, but one of the things that I'm doing over on the Gloss House channel this week during June, or this month during June, is featuring interviews and testimonies from ex-gays, ex-LGBT folks, and boy, that's been amazing. It's been really so. We're starting to refer to June as Ex-Gay Visibility Month. And so it's been amazing to hear these stories. I mean, of just absolute redemption. It's been incredible. Yeah. So keep your eyes open for that, y'all.
Yep. Awesome, guys. So as you heard Michael say, go over to Glossa House, man, and check that out. If that's something that you're jiving with, you want to hear and hear some great testimonies and interviews. But yeah, other than that, guys, that's the conclusion of this show. Thanks for all your participation. Thanks, Evie, for the super chat. We thank all of our guests that decided to ask questions, even those that wanted to just have comments. That was great. Josh, anything else?
I just that I'm pleased. This is really fun, and I love that we do this, and I want to continue to do these deconstruction episodes, and I think they're really great.
Yeah. They also have been pretty good on Real Seekers as well. So I got some feedback to that. They were pretty popular. So anyways, you guys have a good night. As Tyler would say, good night, God bless, and stay like Christ.